The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bastian Bosner-Wurst, and I would like to welcome you to SWK's Sage 100 Customizer and Scripting walkthrough. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm a senior consultant with SWK in the Sage 100 practice. I see in the attendee list that some of the clients I actively work with are here, so some of you know me already. Others, hopefully, I will get the chance to talk to you at some point in the future, maybe on some kind of scripting, customizing project. I would like to do that. I am involved at SWK a lot in these customization projects for our clients where we are trying to avoid custom programming, but still trying to get functionality into the client's system that helps to automate processes. And today's webinar is about that. I want to show you a few options on how to automate the system, on how to get a better Sage 100 experience. And the way how we want to do this is I want to walk through a couple of things. And I know that the level of knowledge in the audience is probably a wider range. So I want to start this off with two polls here just to get a feeling for where people are at, so we can adjust a little bit the content that I will present today. So we will start right now with the first poll that basically will ask you your knowledge on the customizer. Please respond to the poll so we get a feeling on that. Okay, perfect. We have an 88% vote now, so that should be good. A little more than half of the people on this call know what user-defined fields are. Like 30% are actually actively creating those, and a few people have not heard of what that is. And all of that is fine. We'll try to get into like the details there, but also we'll try to make sure that I scratch on the basics a little bit so everyone gets something out of this. All right. The second poll that we will do now is about the custom scripting. Okay, I think we're good here as well. So we have like roughly 30% of the attendees have not heard of the possibilities of custom scripting. So that's very good because we will be able to show you a few things here today. A little more than half of you know about it, but don't know enough about it yet. I feel the same way sometimes, but maybe I can help you a little bit out there. And 14% of you actually create actively scripts and implement those. And again, I will try to make sure that the content I present gives a little bit of content for every one of you. All right, so what I want to start with is I want to start with an overview over the customizer over user-defined fields and table maintenance. So in Sage 100, it is possible to implement fields that are currently not there. So you're using Sage and you feel like, well, on my items, I need 5 more fields that are currently not there. Well, these fields can be put into Sage and they can go into the same tables where your item information is. These fields can flow through into other tables. They can go into your sales orders. They can go into your invoices. And this is all set up within the customizer module, which is under the name Custom Office in your Sage. So if you go to the Custom Office module, you have the user-defined fields and table maintenance. And if you go in there, you can then select your module first, and then within your module, you can go and select your table. and then you can edit fields. So this allows me to add any kind of field that I want to add. I can put in numeric fields, I can put in date fields, I can put in I can put in string fields. So it's all possible. I can put some validation on there right away. So I can tell my fields. Let me just open up one here for you. I can set the field up in a way that I say it's a string, but it has a max length of like 10. So you can limit it that way. I can make it all uppercase. I can give the default value, and also I'm able to validate these fields against other data. So what we do quite a lot is, let's say we have clients that just want the catalog of values to be able to select from. So we can do a data validation here. We can put the information into a list here and say, you can, for this field, you can choose from five different values, and it's a drop-down box. Boom, I can set this up. I can also create a user-defined table, which is basically just a set of user-defined fields. And with that, I then can validate against my fields against this user-defined table. So that allows me to put actually the user-defined table into the user interface in Sage. So I can actually change the values in this catalog on the front end, and then I can put these fields into my screens, into my item screen, into my sales order screen. And if I have them in there, I am able to use them. I will have like the little magnifying glass lookup that lets me select from my catalog. So they function then exactly the same way as the default fields do. I assume, like based on the poll, I assume that most of you know that. So this is just a quick brief review of what like the basic functionality is there. What maybe not everyone knows is how it works to have this data flow through from, let's say, an invoice down to like the history, or what I see quite a lot is that if users need specific information shown in, let's say, a sales order invoice, and they're able to work with Crystal reports to modify their sales order invoices, they tend to join in the table where the information that they need is. So let's say they need information from the item, and this item information is not coming through into the report table, into the work table that is the basis for this invoice. Then they tend to put in the other table as well. This is not best practice for two reasons. One reason is you might end up with a join that duplicates data. That would be not good. And another reason is you're like take out performance, because like having more data coming in, having a join in there, more tables to pull from, will definitely make your reporting slower. So the best way to get this information in there is actually to source this field that you need into your data. So when we talk about invoice printing, let's do this as with an example. So let's say in my invoice printing, I know that my invoices, or it could be the same for sales order, I have SO invoice work. I just know that this table is the table that Sage uses as the basis for the invoice forms that Sage produces. So I can go in here, open up my user-defined fields. I don't have any in here, but now I can create one. I just call it test field. And at this point, I don't have the option to do a manual entry. Reason being is that Sage knows that this table is not exposed to the user. So for these work tables and for a couple of other tables, Sage just knows there is no front end to this table. So I only have the option to go by a business object. And business object just means like the logic behind Sage, where I can ask Sage to put specific information into my table here. So in this case, we just say, okay, we do SO invoice printing report, which is sales order invoice printing. And then as the data source, I have all these objects that are related to this specific invoice printing task that Sage does. So I could get data from the customer, I could data from the salesperson table, I could data from the terms code table, or from the CI item table. So most of the time I see that there is a need to get like item data in there that's not showing, or customer data in there that's not showing, right? So we can do that. Let's say CI item, and then the item code wouldn't make any sense because we already have the item code in our invoices. So that is a field where it wouldn't make sense. But now it exposes all the fields that I have in my CI item. So what I can do now is I can select here. Sometimes it's UDFs. So in my installation, I have user-defined fields for like item category, brand, and tariffs and stuff like that. And I think I want to show this on my invoice. And again, one way would be to do in Crystal Reports a link to the table, just not a good way. Better way to actually do this would be to join in the data here. So I create my field, I give it a name, I look for my data source, which is my object. I'm saying, okay, I've taken it from the CI item object, and I say, I need the tariff in this printable, in this invoice. When I do this, since I'm validating and saying, since I'm taking it from a different data source, I cannot change these things. The tariff field where I'm coming from, it's a numeric field, so it already sets this to numeric, and I have no say about that. If you do this, it's always like it sets it to the correct value. If it would have been a string with a length of 10, then it would have shown me that here as well. I can check here for my data sources. I could put multiple data sources in, or multiple business objects. So if I want to have this happen in AR invoice printing as well, I could just select this as well and select the same thing. So sometimes in some instances you need to get this into this field from multiple business objects. Okay, in our case that's fine. So all I really have to do is now end this here, click OK, and Sage will now update the lookups and everything and the data structure. So if I now would go into my Crystal report for the invoice and say in Crystal reports that I want to validate the database, it will tell me that the database has changed, and then I will be able to see this field that I named test field. Ideally, you would name it the same way as you name as the original field that's coming from. But that is a good way to get this data into, let's say, an invoice. And each time now you process your invoices, Sage will dump this data into this UDF, into this work table, and you will have it there. So one scenario to use that are the work tables. Another scenario is when you create invoices, let's say, or sales orders. You want this on the header, like information from the customer you need on the header. So you can put these fields in and then say, once I create a sales order, I want from the customer to come in this specific field as well. Could be checkboxes that are then used somehow for automation on shipping or something. Could be like customer accounts for UPS and FedEx. All these kind of things can be put into the system with this kind of logic. You can, besides creating new fields and mapping them through the system, you can also edit field settings for existing fields. So I every now and then have clients that ask me, Bastian, I need this specific field to be required. And some fields in Sage are required by default and others are not. Well, with the customizer module, with user-defined fields and table maintenance, you are able to set up specific requirements for existing fields in Sage as well. So all you have to do is you have to know, of course, where the field is. So in inventory management, or in let's say back to our item table, if we go to the item master, which is where all the items are stored, all my inventory items, I can go here and click on these advanced field settings box, and from there I am able to now add advanced field settings. I can select my field. So if for whatever reason I say my category 1 field, I need this to be mandatory for my users, then I can click here and I can actually do this by company if I run multiple companies in Sage, or I could even do it by users, or I say it's for all users in all companies. I say this field needs to be required. Okay, so now by doing this and updating this, that will mean that you cannot save a new item in Sage without really giving a value, putting a value in there, right? So that's a good way of like making sure that your users on the sales order side, on the item side, when they set up stuff, that they don't forget specific fields. It's an easy way to make sure specific fields get a value. So even the standard fields, you can validate against a list of values or against a user-defined table. So that is possible as well. And many people are just not aware of that this functionality is there. Again, to get there, it's custom office, user-defined field and table maintenance. You have to find your table, the table you want to work with. Then you click the advanced field settings button, and then you click the plus button. From the plus button here, you can then select your field. Once you've got your field, you're then able to set up what needs to be set up here. Okay, you can make it required uppercase or whatever you want. So there's like a couple of options there. It's a really good feature that most of my clients are not aware of. Okay, so user-defined tables are the same thing. You can set them up the same way. You click on the module where you want the table. You want it in one of the modules. You put it in there. You click on the folder. Here you have the button for add a user-defined table. You click it. You give it a name. You give it a key field, and then you can put in multiple fields. And these user-defined tables can serve many purposes. One purpose, and I think the main purpose most of the time, is to utilize those to put catalogs in there that are then used somewhere else in Sage, or for validation, or for scripting purposes. Sometimes you need a table to store information, so that's a good way. You create your own tables, and then your scripts, depending on what they do, can store information inside of Sage as well. I mentioned that once we have user-defined tables, we can actually put them in here in a menu so the users can see them if they have the appropriate rights. So they can just click the menu here, click the table, and then the table pops up and they have an interface to delete stuff from the table or put new information into the table. That was just a really quick and brief overview over the customizer. If some of you think, well, that's something I really need to know more about, Bastian, we need to talk at some point more in detail. No worries, we can do that. I'm more than happy to work with each and every one of you who feels like that's something you'll want to learn more about on a one-on-one basis. We can definitely do that. That was just a quick overview. The focus of this webinar here today is supposed to be on the scripting. So I want to dive into that. And scripting, I just want to point out first what the differences are between like the scripting and the custom programming, right? So when someone comes to us and says, well, there's functionality that I need in Sage that out of the box the system doesn't have. There's always these two ways. You can say like, well, we can do custom programming and fix that for you, or maybe we can do custom scripting. The beauty of custom programming definitely is we can do a lot, because we just hook into Sage, and inside of Sage we might either change some of the code, we inject our code into that, so we can make it behave in completely different ways than from what it's doing now. We can give you like 100% the user interface that you have within Sage, so your users won't be able to see the difference if they're in standard Sage or in the customized part of Sage. That the one major downside of that is, in my opinion, that it's hard to tell what is actually custom. So I have taken over clients that came on board with us from other resellers. And then when we talk about what's custom in their system, they tell me, well, we have a customization. I can't really tell you what it does. And that's really hard if we have if there's no good documentation of what has been changed. Then sometimes it's really hard to figure out, A, are customizations still needed? B, what do they do and how can we work with them? What needs to be done if we do an upgrade, right? So this is sometimes a little tricky. Scripts, on the other hand, they allow us to create functionality in Sage, additional functionality in Sage, make Sage behave in a different way than it would usually do, but it's laying on top of Sage, which means it's very, very visible. I can go into each Sage installation, go into my user-defined script maintenance, and I will see all the scripts that are there. I can go into my user-defined fields and table maintenance, and I can find out which scripts are actually triggered by Sage at specific events. We will go into that. So that allows everyone with like a certain level of knowledge to really see, okay, there are scripts in place. B, this is what triggers these scripts. And C, this is what they do. So it's easy. It's very, very transparent. It's easy to see what is happening. So, and it's often these scripts are way easier to create and implement than like a full-blown custom programming project. So this is why a lot of times scripting really, in my opinion, is the way to go. It has a few downsides when it comes to like if you require an extended user interface within Sage, well then scripting is nothing for you. But for a lot of business cases, you don't need a user interface. So examples of where I have used scripting is, and we have different ways of scripting. We can do button scripts, we can do event-triggered scripts, and we can do scripts that are actually doing stuff from the outside of Sage, right? For like button scripts, I have done scripts where we click a button and in the item and based on the item code, Sage goes to a folder, checks for like 5 different file endings and the name of the item code to bring up a PDF or bring up a CAD file, a CAD file, or something like that. So one button, different file format, and you open a file. That would be one thing. I have done button scripts that that actually create quotes in Excel. So some of my clients, they create their sales order, they create their sales orders in Sage as quotes, but then they actually are a little more interactive. So the their customer gets an Excel sheet where they put in the quantities, and then there's like tiered pricing or something happening, or quantity box limits that are happening. So they can only put in specific numbers. So we were able to give them an interface where they type in the sales order / the quote and sales order entry, click a button, it generates an Excel file with all the information that is necessary, and they just have to email this one Excel file out to their customer and then get it back. So that's like one of these button script scenarios, a little more involved. Or I did another one where clients can email. Many of you use paperless Office, but sometimes you just want to go back into a sales order and email it to a specific person. So I created a button script for them that allows them to go into a sales order. You type in a text, you type an email address, and you can just email the sales order out of this interface right away without having to print and go to paperless Office, which then doesn't allow you to select specific email addresses. So that would be another example for button scripts. So event-triggered scripts are scripts that are basically running they can run on almost every event in Sage. And an event is like if a field value gets changed. So we can trigger a script that starts to run if someone types in a quantity in sales order entry. So I can say if someone enters something there, I can say I want a script to run once the quantity has been validated, which means so Sage checks if I enter a letter in there, Sage will know that this is not a valid value for that. So it allows me to hook myself, to hook my script into this event once it is validated. So okay, once Sage knows that the user put in something that can go into this field, I can run a script and say, okay, the quantity is in there. Well, now I can grab this quantity with my script and do something. And examples for that where we have used that, and I will show you a couple of things later, Examples where we have used that are pricing scripts. I've worked with a lot of clients that have very, very interesting pricing structures where Sage is simply not able to calculate the pricing. It might be different pricing by ship to. I've seen that. It might be specific pricing if there's a full moon and it's a Tuesday, or whatever the logic might be. If there is logic behind it, we are actually able to like put the pricing in like one of either, if you have a SQL database, to put it in an existing SQL server, or put the pricing information into like a free SQL database, and then at the time you enter a quantity, a script actually performs the logic that you have in place to get to the correct pricing, and then reaches out to the SQL server, gets the pricing, and dumps it into the pricing field. So for the user, the user doesn't feel a difference. The user just types in a quantity and the price comes up, which is exactly the same thing that happens in standard Sage. But now with scripting, we are able to put our own logic on top of that for that pricing. And that's one that I have used quite a bit for clients where the pricing structure didn't work. For example, in Sage, everyone knows the problem is that if your pricing expires January 1st, or like December 31st, and January 1st is the new pricing in place. Well, with how the pricing is set up in Sage, you kind of have to load the pricing at this particular day. With a scripting solution, we can have like a start and an end date, and we can base it off the sales order date. We can base it off the invoice date. So if I'm in January 5th, on January 5th, I enter an invoice and select the invoice date of 12/31 with like a pricing script in place, I'm still able to get the 12/31 pricing, even though I already have the new pricing in my system, which would, in this case, be our SQL database or database where we're pulling it from. So there's like endless scenarios of where and how we can use this. So again, the first thing was a button script. You click a button, something happens. The second one is an event triggered script. So something in Sage happens that makes this script run. And these scripts, these event triggered scripts, they can also be triggered by internal things where no user interaction is happening. So some of you might be using different technologies to create orders or something, or invoices. May it be InSync, may it be Visual Integrator or MapAdog. So we can have these scripts run or not run, depends on really what the purpose of the script is, on these events as well. So if we talk pricing again, for example, I am able to determine that this sales order, this invoice right now is created by MapAdog, or it is created by InSync, or it is created by Visual Integrator. And then based on that, I can say, yeah, I still want to run my logic, or no, I don't want to run my logic because for these orders, I have something else in place. So you can determine this. You can also determine if a specific company only should run scripts. You could even do it on a user-by-user basis if that is necessary. So it gives you a lot of room to change scripts. So that's the event-based part. The third one is the business object interface. So Sage exposes this functionality also to the outside. So I am able to write a script, start the script outside of Sage, from the outside, log into Sage, and make stuff happen there. That is very useful when it comes to automate specific processes. So I'm not a fan of using this to bulk load orders or invoices, because there are good solutions for that. So it doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel. But I have used it, for example, to create scripts that go into Sage, run the master console to see if a specific task is running. Let's say InSync, let's say barcode module. And if those are not running, then I start them up automatically. So, and you can then, these outside scripts, you can trigger those with a task scheduler in Windows. So you run them on the server every 15 minutes. The script just checks, is barcode running, yes or no? If it's running, just do nothing. If it's not running, well, just start it up. Okay, so that's a scenario for these scripts that come from the outside and do stuff. that's the overview about what kinds of scripts we have. We do use VB script as the language for these scripts, which is good and bad at the same time. So VB script is a language that is not very strongly typed, if that means anything to you. So I can create a variable. I don't have to dim my variable, so I can just say, that's a little bit of coding talk. I can just say a equals 5, and then my variable a now has a value of 5. In the next line, I can say a equals, and then put a string in, and it will be a string. And I don't have to define my variables in the beginning. That is convenient if you like to do stuff like quick and dirty. It's really bad for when it comes to debugging, because you put a typo into your script, and you will end up looking for hours to find, because this value now is 0, but you expect it to be something else, and it takes you forever to figure out why this value is 0 until you finally realize, well, I actually just typed it wrong at some point, and it's just not the same variable anymore. So the scripting language is VB script. Another downside is there is no debugger here in Sage. So the only way of really debugging these scripts is running them and trial and error them and look through this. So the feedback Sage gives you if a script fails most of the time. For the button script, it's pretty good. For the button script, it will tell you it's on line 55 of the script, and you can actually see where you have the problem. For the event-triggered scripts, not so much. For the event-triggered scripts, it's really hard sometimes to figure out where the script actually is failing. What I do sometimes is I put message boxes in just to see, okay, I'm getting to this point, I'm getting to this point, and I narrow it down this way, right? So again, language, VB script. It's easy to work with, lots of resources on the internet. The part that's a little harder to get is, it's a little harder to get the Sage part of it, right? So general VB script information you will find all over the internet that will give you all the functions and methods you need to create scripts. But then when it comes to the Sage side, it's a little tougher to get the information you need, like what the objects in Sage are and how to work with them. So one thing that I always recommend to people is, the first thing you can do is, in Sage, on this resources tab, you have a file and program layout, so you can always open that up. In there, you have a file layout. Under the file layout, you have all the tables. So we had CI item earlier. So here I see CI item. So I can look up all my fields in here, and if they're string, and if they're what their max length is. So all this stuff is in there, available for everyone. And it also has an object reference. So I can go here and I can see what the object names are called. So Sage has the objects that are most important to us are these underscore bus and underscore SVC objects. SVC stands for service. And most of the time you have like 2 with the same name and then a bus and a service. And this is meant in scripting for the service object is just meant to return values. So I can ask, let's say on our CI item, I go into here and I find my, I hope I find it, my CI item. They call it CI item code here. So this is my object, and if I want to know something from a specific item, I can just call this service object, and then I put in my filters and stuff like, okay, I want to know for this particular item what the field value for this field is, okay? And then I would just use the service object. The bus object is actually a little more functional. It allows me to write data back. So with the bus object, I can say, okay, this is my item, and I want to actually put something into this particular field. This is when I would use the bus object. So most of the time, you have a service and a bus object. For some tables, you only have one or the other, depending on what Sage wants you to be able to do with it. Okay. let me show you a little bit of how that looks like, or how you actually implement the script. So you can write your script just in a text file. It's VB script, so the ending usually would be VBS. You write your script and then you put it into user-defined script maintenance within the custom office module. So you go in here, you throw it, you give it a name, a script ID, and you start typing, and then you would see all the scripts that are in your system here. So one of the scripts that I want to show you in a few seconds is actually the one that goes what is it, quantity pricing, order multiple. So this is what I want to show you. So what this script does is it forces the user to put quantity multiples in. So on the item level in CI item, I have a field that defines that this item is sold in like a case pack of 4. So you cannot order 5 or you cannot order 3. You have to order 4 or 8. And we can write the script in a way that we have a hard stop. So if the user puts in 5, it will not let the user save the sales order. We can do that. Or we can do like a soft stop and just give a warning. Okay, user, you are putting in 3. Is that what you want? Yes or no? And we could also have the user like, okay, you put in 3. Do you want to put it to 4? So automatically have the field go to the next level. Whatever we want, we can like adjust the script to what the client needs. All right. So here you can see this script, and it doesn't have much in it. And I just want to go over the structure here a little bit with you and what this means. So this script I only want to run if I have a user interface in there, right? So I don't want to run this on automated imports because it has a pop-up in it. And if I have a pop-up, I said earlier I can create scripts that run. I can create scripts that run when a visual integrator job is going, or when like an in-sync creates orders. Well, there is no user there that can do anything. That means I have to make sure that this kind of script that I have here with a pop-up only runs if I have a user interface present. So I have this here as my clause around it. I could also, at this point, I could also tell it to only use specific company codes and whatever other restriction I might have to make sure the script doesn't run at all. In VB script, these little ticks here, they just mean it's a comment, so that they don't mean anything. I put this exit sub in there all the time because instead of then deactivating the script in Sage, I can just go in here, take the tick out, and what this will do is when I compile it, it will actually run the script, but the script will actually exit right here. So it's not going through the logic. It's just a quick way of turning on and off the logic for a particular script without having to unhook it from an event, which we will look into in a minute. Okay, so this is just the outside thing here. And again, I said it's not a development environment. So if we look at this in this particular language here, in this user interface, it looks horrible. You can't really tell a difference. So I like to use like a notepad. Oh, come on. You can use different programs to show stuff. Notepad++ is I guess a good one that you can use. So if I go here and open my file, where should they be? Actually, no, it's in the Sage folder. Okay. So the scripts, also a good thing, if you don't know it, scripts go into the CM folder in Sage. So I have my Sage installation CM script, and this is where Sage puts them. These are the single script files, and then if you compile stuff, what Sage does is it creates this compiled file for like the sales order detail bus, for example. So this is like a Sage created file out of my logic here, and the file we were looking at was the order multiple. So I want to open it with this one here. And now I have an interface that actually shows me a little bit of highlighted syntax, which makes it easier to like review and look at these things. It's totally fine to just do this with a regular text editor or within Sage. It just doesn't look as good. in my opinion. If you do a lot of scripting, it's just easier to have like a nice interface. So again, we discussed these outer parts here. What we do in here is we run this script on the sales order details. So in this case, it means if I'm in sales order on the line item, then something happens. In a particular case, it happens when you put in a quantity because we want to check the quantity. So for that, we have to, to figure out if we are correct with the quantity or not, we have to utilize, in our case here, we have to get the quantity that the user has entered. But the first thing I want to check is what kind of item do I have? Do I have a regular item or do I have a like just a comment? And there is no quantity for a comment. So I only care about regular items. So the first thing is I ask, when the script runs it asks Sage for the item type. And the item type is a field that I have in the sales order table. So I can use something that Sage calls OBUS object. So OBUS OBJ is always present for my script. It's always the current object. So that means that is my line item. In this case, like I'm in the first line in my sales order entry. So the OBUS object at this point is this particular line. And then I can use different methods that this object supports to get to what I need. So the get value is very common. So I can ask my OBusiness object for a particular value. And then the syntax for that is I tell it, okay, I want the item type. And I know the item type is a string variable, and Sage requires that if you have a field that's a string, the field is called item type, then you have to put in the $sign behind it. If it's numeric, like this one down here, you don't put in the $sign. Okay. And then I just say, okay, get this value from the item type field and stuff it into this particular variable. And I tend to define my variables up here. You don't always have to do it. I just do it out of, I don't know, just the way how I do it. I set them up and I put it in here. So this line returns to me the item type, which is a numeric value, and I know that item type 1 is actually a regular item. And here the red ball equals, that is, so red ball is mostly used between the people who develop scripts within Sage, but you could name this anything. So this is just these functions here, they have a return value. So they will return like a 1, a 0, a 2, and depending on what you do, you can check for this return value to see if it actually found something. So because this field, for example, it could have no value in general in Sage, or we could have had a problem where we couldn't just get to the value, right? So if I evaluate this field, what comes back there, I can actually put some error handling in there. In this case, in this scenario, I just don't need it because I know that the OBUS object item type will return this value. There is no need for me to put more validation into this. I just know it will be good what I get back there. Okay, so then I do, like, if I have an item type of 1, then I want to do something. If I don't have an item type of 1, then I'm just done with the script, right? So if I have an item type of 1, then I actually want to get from the same object, from my line item, I want to get the quantity ordered. So I pick up the quantity ordered, and this part here, what it does is now I need to know what actually is the case quantity for this particular item. And in order to get that, I have to check this out on the table for the item. And there's like different ways to get it. I could establish a whole new object, but the fastest way is there is a child object. So Sage already has a relation to this particular item, so I don't have to go into a table and then set a filter on an item and then pick the value. It already knows I'm dealing with this particular item, so it offers me the OBUS object get child handle function, and that now allows me to set this object. So I create this object, and it's called, I know the name is item code, and once I have it and I name it OItem, I can use the OItem get value. So I created this object, and like I did here on the OBUS object, I now have an object that supports the get value. So now I can get the value for the UDF pack quantity. I know it's not a string, it's numeric, so there is no need for a $. Again, that's like one of the big things that drives you nuts if you're trying to debug your programs. If you just miss the $, that's one thing where stuff goes wrong. And I dropped this into the order multiple field, and now I have everything that I need from Sage, right? So the next part down here is, and here's something from my debugging in there still. And now I'm down here, and I just check out if things are numeric, and if they are numeric, do they have a value, and that's the order multiple more than 0. If all that is the case, then I do, and this is just mathematical calculations now, I figure out what, if I'm good or not where I should be, right? That's just what this does. It's just, it just has nothing to do with Sage. So I'm trying to say it's just basic VB script logic to get to the logic that I have, and then I figure out I get a remainder back. If my remainder is more than 0, then that means that I'm not on an order multiple. That means I have to do something. And in this case, the client only wanted to get a message. They didn't want any further logic, but I could put in more logic here. But in this case, you only want to see, okay, this is the problem. So this is a pretty simple script. There's not much to it. I know if you don't know the syntax, it looks like gibberish, but it's pretty easy to learn, like the basic things. And again, just a few lines of code. And now I want to show you what it actually does. So here is the same piece of script in Sage. Once you're done, you save it, you hit accept. There's a compile button here, but we don't need to compile it just right now because we have to hook it up to an event first. We hook stuff up to events in user-defined fields and table maintenance. So I open this again if it's not already open. Okay, there it is. And I said I want to run this in sales order entry. I could hook it up to multiple events, or also could handle it in invoice entry. But in our case, it's sales order entry, and I said it's on a sales order detail, right? So I go here, and then I have this button for user-defined scripts. I can click that, and here you see that I already prepared that for you. So I have 3 scripts that run on this table. 2 of them run on a post validate, and 1 of those runs on a post write of the table. So this is the one that we just looked at. So if the column quantity ordered is validated, then I run this script. And I just want to show you what other options you have here. So I can open this up. I pick my event, and I have multiple events table: pre-write, post-write, pre-delete, post-delete, post-read. And most of the time, it's either the table pre or post-write, or it's like a column. So column usually the post validate, because then I make sure you have good data coming in. So I do a column post validate, and then I can select my field, zip, and then I can say, okay, I want to run this script on this field. And once you have selected this, you can also select a priority. If you want to make sure that one script runs before another script runs, then you can put it in at a different priority, which will then just determine the order the scripts run in. No need to do anything here because it didn't change anything. The scripts are already hooked up. So we can now look at an item in item maintenance. Actually, I think I have all of this here. Yeah. So I open up item maintenance. We pick out an item. Let's see. I have my custom field here. There is no pack quantity here. I have a pack quantity of 4 on this particular item, right? Let's keep this open here. So we have a pack. So I created a user-defined field in here where the user can define what the case pack quantity is, for example. Okay. And now I have sales order entry. And in sales order entry, I can create a new sales order, select my customer, go to my line items, and it was this particular line item. So far, nothing has happened because we set the script up to actually run at the time this quantity ordered has been validated. So now I can put in my quantity ordered, and I type in a 2, and I can hit my tab or whatever I do. I don't have it in stock, so that's fine. Oh, and of course the script, for whatever reason, did not run. Was it the correct item that I chose here? Let me see that. H252, okay. Let's make sure we actually have this running. Okay, let's go here. Okay, I just want to make sure we have it all. Okay, that's the wrong piece. I just want to go here. Okay, so order multiple color post validate. Okay, let's set up. Okay, then let's go here and order multiple here. So that looks good. So this is how by clicking this, I can compile all my scripts at once. And let's reopen sales order entry. One thing that's really important to know is if you make a change to a script and you recompile, you have to get out of this window. So if my script is running in sales order entry, I really have to be out of sales order entry, or it just won't work. Oh, actually, yeah, the script actually, it was, I'm a little sorry, I'm stupid. The script was running, but 4 is a multiple of 2, so there was nothing to happen, nothing supposed to happen. I'm sorry about that. So let's put this item in again, and let's do a 3, and now something should happen, hopefully. No, of course it doesn't. Okay, so I'm pretty sure I tested the script yesterday. I don't know, I probably changed something that took it out. There might be interference between multiple scripts here. So let me do one thing and quickly just these scripts, they were created for separate for different clients. So I did not test them ahead of time to work together. So let me just take other stuff out here. So sales order detail, user-defined scripts, item code. Let's take this one out. Okay, close, compile. Okay, get out of here. Okay, zip, mine, customer. All right, yeah, so it's like an interference between these two scripts, and I apologize for that. I did not test them together. Maybe it would have been good if I would have spaced them out a little bit because they had the same priority. But now I put in a value that is not an order multiple of 4 for this item. So it tells me, well, you entered a quantity of 3, needs to be a multiple of 4. Do you want to change it, yes or no? So it's not a hard stop. It's a soft stop. I say yes, and it changes it to 4. I say no, it just stays at 3, right? We can do this here, like the other option. I put this in. Again, I put 3 in. I say no, and now it stays at 3. All right. Again, we can put more logic in and do whatever needs to be done to make this work. Okay. While we are here, I can show you another script that that I have done just to give you a few like ideas of what can be scripted. A lot of stuff can be scripted. So another scenario of my clients was they create these super long sales orders, super long sales order invoice, or even purchase orders, and they deal 95% of the time they have the sales account and the cost account, and that's all perfect for them. But then they have instances where they need to override these numbers, and that's the one that was actually breaking right now. So we gave them the option to actually change accounts in bulk here. So for whatever reason, they end up with like all these accounts, and now they need to change all of them for the whole order, and it's like multiple lines to like a different value. You could go in and just copy and paste. If you have 50 lines, that takes a while. So we created these buttons down there so they can override the sales account and they can override the cost of goods sold account. And I want to show you how that works. And again, I have to, since I unhook the event, I have to go back in here and put it back in. Actually, no, it's not even running there, so I can actually do this right away, because this event, this script is triggered on the sales order header, as you might have seen. It is the fields are down here, which is part of the header, like the sales order header, and not of the lines tab. So I can put let me just put a few items in here so you can see what happens. So I put my items in here. Then they decide they want to use a different account. So this is actually a button script here that I created. So these buttons, they look like the center page buttons, but it's a button script. So I click here. This button script now opens up the GL account list, which now lets me select an account. And so far, just the button script. I select it, and the button script puts this field now into the sales account override field. And there's another script now running that, based on if there's a value in here, asks me if I want to change this. And I say yes, and it changed all the accounts here. Okay. So I could also just type here. Then I don't need the button script. So if I just want to type, I just don't see the number here. So I can type 450-0100. I type this in. Do I want to set this? Yes. And now all my sales accounts are set to this particular value, right? So now this one here is a script that is running based off the event sales order header on this particular field here, and this one as well. And this is a button script. So this button script triggers this one, because this button script, if I select an account, it just throws the account in that field. And if I put something into that field, then that triggers the other script. So it's two scripts that are related, but they're not connected to one another, right? So this button script really just gives me this interface to select an account and then throw it back. Okay, I can show you real quick what this looks like, and that might be a little bit too much. I want to show you one other script that we have done for a client. Just want to make sure that we have this live. So we have items. Let's go back to item maintenance. I think we have this on this item. So I have a client that really wants to put, like, if they sell particular items, they need to put an extra charge per each on for a tariff and for a surcharge and for packaging. So that's what they want. So they want to create one item in sales order entry, and they want 3 other items to be generated, or only 1 or 2. This is why they have the checkboxes here. So if they only want the tariff, they could uncheck these 2. If they only want packaging charge, then they would make their choice however they want. So we have $10, 50 cents, and $15 for these 3 items. These items are set up as miscellaneous items in Sage, right? So now if I go to sales order entry, create my sales order, select the customer, and again, I could check for more stuff. I could check if this is going into another country or something, right? So I select my item. I say I order 12 of those. I click through my lines, and boom, I have my 3 surcharges coming in automatically. So this now puts in my special duty, and this is just how they wanted it, right? They didn't want $120 as one charge. They wanted 12 times 120, 12 times $10, 12 times 50 cents. So that's a pretty easy way to avoid 3 extra lines that need to be keyed. So if you have these instances where if you have a particular item, then you always have to add something to it, well, that's an easy way to automate Sage and make it work for you in a much better way. I think I can quickly show you that, and then we are probably already at the end of our session here. Again, if someone feels like there should be more that they want to talk about, I'm more than happy to talk this in much more detail with any single one of you. We can just set up a time, and I can put you on the right path there. So let me just find this particular script there. This is the charge add. It's always good to name the scripts in a good way so you can find them. So this is also a pretty short script. So not much is happening there. We are looking for the old business object to get the value, because again, we only need it when it's a regular item. We don't need to care about this if it's not. If it is, then we do a few other things. We get again a child handle to the item code. So that's basically the same approach, right? Once we have a child handle to the item code, we get all these user-defined fields to see, does this item require us to charge a tariff? Does it require us to charge a surcharge? Does it require us to charge for packaging? And then, if we know if it does, if the tariff is yes, if we need a tariff, then I add a line for that. In my sales order detail, I put in an additional line. I set the value as the item code for the tariff item, which I know I have this defined up here, right? I know that it's the item I have set up. So I put my tariff item in. I put my quantity ordered in, and then I put the tariff for this particular item in that I got from there as well. I do this for the other three things, and this part here just helps me to actually make the screen update. So sometimes you write a script on a grid, on like a line item script, and it actually does makes the changes, but you don't see them. So that actually helps me to make sure that I see the new lines coming in. So they're there and I can also see them. Okay, so again, a pretty simple script. It's only a few lines, but it takes more than just like 15 minutes to write this. All these scripts really need to be tested. So you need to write them, you need to come up with the logic, and then you need to really test them. As you saw earlier, when I have these two scripts running at the same time, it doesn't work, but it doesn't tell me why. And if I do it without testing, then I might have issues in the system and not be aware of it right away. Okay, so with that, I would like to end this webinar today here. Thank you all for attending. Again, reach out to us if you want to do more, and maybe in the future we will start doing actually scripting classes. So if someone is interested, I might start a webinar series where we start from scratch and actually start to develop scripts. I think there's a market for that. I think people like the idea of doing it by themselves. Reach out if you think it's a good idea. Thank you very much and have a good day, everyone.